At Lincoln Heights Academy, an elite school where wealth and privilege reign, Miss Emily Carter, the new English teacher, faced an unexpected challenge. Ethan Parker wasn't just any student. He was a legacy, raised to believe his name alone earned him a place in the world. On the first day, Ethan mocked her, but instead of retaliating, Miss Carter made a decision that would shock everyone. She chose to confront Ethan with a lesson he would never forget, a lesson that would test not only his academic skills, but also his worldview. Real-life stories bring you a powerful tale of courage and transformation. Miss Carter's quiet resilience collided with Ethan's inherited arrogance in a classroom full of tense expectations. Ethan's mocking remarks about Miss Carter's background didn't just challenge her, they pushed her to take a bold risk, one that could cost her career. Yet, she chose to invest in Ethan, knowing real change often begins with tough lessons. The assignment she gave him wasn't just about books or history. It was about seeing people and the world differently. Miss Carter's decision led to a journey of personal awakening for Ethan, changing the course of his future and shaking the foundations of privilege he once took for granted. Would this bold move lead to transformation? Watch to see how this teacher's daring choice forever altered one of her wealthiest, most entitled students, and the world around him. Emily Carter had spent her whole life preparing for a moment like this, but as she stood before the towering gates of Lincoln Heights Academy, her heart raced with uncertainty. She had earned her place through grit, brilliance, and a deep passion for teaching. At 33, with degrees from Harvard University and Stanford, she was determined to make an impact, even if it meant standing out in a sea of privilege and tradition. She knew teaching at an elite academy would be different, but she never expected how quickly she'd be tested. Inside the grand, ivy-covered walls of Lincoln Heights, she realized the true test wasn't the lesson plans or syllabi, it was the students. And one student, in particular, stood out: Ethan Parker. He was the embodiment of wealth and entitlement. His family name had been etched into the school's history for generations. His father, a powerful senator, loomed large over the institution. Ethan's presence in her class felt like a challenge she couldn't ignore. Ethan wasn't just late to class on the first day. His swagger, dismissive attitude, and clear disinterest in anything outside his world screamed one thing: Ethan Parker didn't belong in Miss Carter's class. As she looked at him standing there with his smirk, she understood something else. Ethan wasn't just challenging her as a teacher. He was testing her in a way she hadn't prepared for. He wasn't asking for her credentials. He was denying her the space to teach with respect. "Dr. Thompson was supposed to teach us," Ethan interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "Are you sure you're in the right class?" Emily felt the eyes of her students shift between them. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. She could feel the weight of their expectations and the power dynamic in the room. Ethan wasn't just questioning her authority. He was testing the very foundation of who she was. But Miss Carter, seasoned by years of navigating spaces where people like her weren't always welcome, didn't flinch. She smiled and corrected him, holding her ground. "No, Mr. Parker," she said calmly. "Dr. Thompson retired last year. I'm your teacher now, and I'd appreciate it if you'd show me the respect I deserve." The room was silent for a split second. Emily wondered if her confidence had come across as too harsh, but she'd learned the hard way that in spaces where you don't belong, softness is weakness. She had to be firm, but still graceful if she was going to survive here. By the end of the week, Emily had won over most of her class with her passion for literature. She had them analyzing works by Faulkner and Toni Morrison, drawing connections between their personal lives and the texts. But Ethan was different. He was the exception that refused to be swayed. Every lesson, every conversation, every book she suggested, he resisted. His comments weren't just challenges. They were attacks aimed at her credentials, her race, and everything that made her a black teacher in a sea of white faces. "I don't see why we're studying diversity again," Ethan said one day, leaning back in his chair with a bored expression. "Why can't we just read something classic?" "I assure you, Mr. Parker," Emily responded with controlled calmness, "Faulkner is as classic as it gets. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature." But Ethan wasn't done. "I mean, shouldn't we be reading something that will actually help us get into college? My dad says we should focus on the Western canon." Ethan's tone was dismissive, as though his father's opinion held more weight than the Nobel Prize or the very foundation of American literature. Emily felt the sharp sting of his words, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she raised an eyebrow and smiled. "I'm sure your father has valuable insights, Mr. Parker," she said. "But the Western canon is incomplete without voices like Faulkner's. You'll find the more perspectives you consider, the clearer the world becomes." But Ethan wasn't interested in understanding. He was interested in proving something, that his world, the world of privilege, was the only world that mattered. And when his comments became more pointed, more personal, Miss Carter knew she had a choice to make. "You taught at some inner-city school before this, right?" Ethan continued, his voice loud and mocking. "Must be a culture shock teaching students who can actually read." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the first time someone had said something like that to her. She had endured worse throughout her life, from school to her career. But this time was different. She wasn't just defending herself. She was defending her students, her dignity, her worth. Her mind raced for a moment, but she quickly regained control. She took a breath, placed her marker down, and met Ethan's gaze with a calm, unwavering stare. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice even but sharp, "gather your things and wait for me in the hallway. We'll continue this conversation there." Ethan smirked, collected his things, and walked to the door. But he didn't know what he was walking into. Outside the classroom, Emily could hear the hum of the school, students chatting, the noise of their teenage lives unfolding without a care. But here in this hallway, it was just the two of them. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, still projecting arrogance despite the clear tension between them. "You really think you can talk to me like that?" he challenged. "My dad's on the board. You're not going to get away with this." Emily took a moment, watching him closely. Behind the bravado, she saw the cracks. This wasn't just a spoiled rich kid trying to push her buttons. This was a boy who had never been told no, a boy who didn't know what it meant to work for something outside of his family name. "No," she replied, her voice cool and steady. "But I am more interested in who your father is than who you choose to be. You've disrupted my class repeatedly, Mr. Parker, and I won't stand for it. You'll either show respect, or we'll continue this conversation with Headmaster Anderson." The words hit him like a slap, and for the first time, Ethan's arrogance faltered. But he wasn't ready to admit defeat, not yet. "I'll tell my father about this," he said, his voice faltering. "I'm sure he'll hear all about it," Emily said. "But for now, I expect you to reflect on your actions. We'll pick up where we left off on Monday." The following days were a mixture of tension and quiet reflection. Ethan, who once had nothing but contempt for her, now found himself cornered. Emily had taken a gamble, one that could have easily cost her. But she had chosen to see Ethan not as a problem, but as a person capable of change, capable of growth. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could guide him there. Meanwhile, Ethan's own discomfort grew. He hadn't expected this kind of response from a teacher. His father's influence, his wealth, none of that mattered here. At the community center where Miss Carter had once worked, he saw a different kind of world, a world where kids didn't have the luxury of entitlement, where every lesson was hard-earned, where resources were scarce but resilience was abundant. He wasn't just observing, he was learning. Ethan's transformation didn't happen overnight. It was gradual. At first, he begrudged the assignment she gave him, to volunteer at the Riverside Community Center and compare the educational resources there to Lincoln Heights. He saw it as a punishment, a way for her to get back at him. But the more time he spent at Riverside, the more he saw something else. He saw children who didn't have his resources or advantages, but who worked harder and dreamed bigger. He saw Miss Carter's dedication, her passion, and how she fought for every student to succeed. One day, as Ethan sat with Jordan, a student at Riverside who dreamed of studying engineering, he began to realize something. It wasn't just the kids who lacked resources, it was the system that was broken. The system that had always given him more than enough while holding back others who deserved just as much. By the time Ethan had completed his assignment, he wasn't just a student giving a presentation. He was a person giving a confession. He stood before his classmates in the auditorium, with his father in the front row, and told them the truth. The truth is, Ethan said, his voice strong but his emotions raw. I came into this project thinking I knew everything about merit and opportunity. But what I found was that success isn't about resources or who your family is. It's about the potential we all have to do something meaningful. The applause was hesitant at first, but it grew as Ethan finally found the courage to confront the reality of his privilege and his responsibility to change it. The story didn't end with his speech. As the school year progressed, Ethan's relationship with his father became strained. His friends began to distance themselves. But despite the pressure and resistance, Ethan knew one thing. He had changed, and the world around him would never look the same. In the end, Miss Carter's decision to challenge Ethan Parker, to see him not as a problem, but as a person capable of transformation, had paid off. It wasn't just Ethan who had changed. It was the whole school, the whole community. And as Ethan stood at graduation, he realized that the greatest lessons weren't in textbooks, but in the hard truths we choose to face about ourselves. Ethan's transformation wasn't immediate. It was gradual. But the more he reflected on his experiences, the clearer it became. Privilege wasn't just about wealth. It was about the opportunities it bought. He had seen it firsthand at Riverside, a place where talent was abundant but resources were scarce. In those students, he had seen the drive to succeed despite the odds. And in Miss Carter, he had found an educator who truly believed in the potential of all her students, regardless of where they came from. When he stood before his classmates at graduation, Ethan knew his journey had only just begun. The real privilege, he said, is not just being born into success, but having the opportunity to make the world better for those who don't have it easy. His words, once hesitant, now carried a weight he had never expected to bear, one of responsibility and understanding. As Ethan made his way through the ceremony, he spotted Miss Carter in the crowd. Her smile was steady and proud, the same smile she had given him on the first day, even when he didn't deserve it. That moment, small yet significant, reminded him of the lesson that had shaped him. Change starts with recognizing the power of perspective. If this story inspired you or gave you chills, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends and family, and if you want more powerful and emotional stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss an update. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below about this story, and if you enjoyed this story, give it a big thumbs up. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that touch hearts and inspire change. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.